going to be talking about opportunity zones with a little bit of a focus on San Jose and Silicon Valley. And we have a nice breadth of experience to talk about different angles and opportunities, ways to benefit, and also opportunities to not benefit from opportunity zones if you don't know what you're doing. Our panel is comprised today of folks from different areas. We have Nathan Donato Weinstein from the city of San Jose, going to talk to us about development from the city side. Also talking about development will be Eric Hayden from Urban Catalyst, the private side. We also have with us David Saccarellis. He does tax with Seiler. And finally, we have a guy named Sean Cottle. He's a lawyer with Hoge Fenton, and he's going to talk to us about the legal aspects of opportunity zones. So please give a round of applause for a very speaker.
Come on up, gentlemen. Well, welcome everyone. Just in the order of the presentation.
Again, welcome everyone to our discussion about opportunity zones. And before I get into the meat of the discussion, I just want to see by a show of hands, how many of you out there were aware of opportunity zones and opportunity funds before you received the email that we sent you about a month ago?
Oh, wow.
Nice. Of course. So keep your hand up if you were knowledgeable and aware of opportunity zones and opportunity funds back in October 19th, when the first set of regulations came out that expanded upon the concept. So how many people were? Oh, wow. Oh, great. So some of you have been following this for a period of time. Well, I'm just going to go into an overview quickly about what the program is all about, and then we'll get into discussions about the tax ramifications and the operation of an opportunity fund and then qualified opportunity zones. So again, just an overview. As we all know, Congress passed the Tax Cut and Job Act back in December of 2018. And within that bill, that stack of that bill, there were 5 pages that related to the statute, which is actually 1400Z, 1 for the opportunity zones and 2 for the opportunity funds. And if done properly, as we all know, the statute allows for the tax to be deferred on eligible capital gains for a period of time, and that's until December 31st, 2026, as well as, if it's done properly, there will be, you don't have to pay taxes at all after 10 years on the appreciation of your investment in the opportunity fund. So what is an opportunity zone? An opportunity zone is the low-income, distressed community that has been identified in the 50 states and the 5 territories of the U.S. That designation had to have occurred before July 1st of 2018 by the governors of those 50 states and the territories. And to date, the Treasury Department has certified over 8,700 qualified opportunity zones nationwide and in those territories. And within California, the state of California has identified 879 census tracts. So as you can do the math, California has over 10% of the qualified opportunity zones that exist currently in the United States. Now when you're participating in a qualified opportunity fund in the zone, you can this only applies to property that has been acquired after December 31st, 2017. So how is this program different than a 1031 exchange? Well, as everyone likely knows, in a 1031 exchange, you have to use all the proceeds of that sale to exchange into another piece of property. You've got to use all of the proceeds. You can't withhold anything. If you do, that's boot, and you're going to pay taxes on it. With regard to an opportunity fund and opportunity zone, what you do is use your gains to invest, but also you can pocket your initial investment and not have to pay capital gains out of that investment. Also, 1031 exchange, you have to do a like-kind exchange. In other words, real estate for real estate. But however, with the Opportunity Fund and the Opportunity Zone program, you can invest in a corporation by investing in stock in addition to investing in the real estate. So how many people know about the sin businesses that exist that do not qualify for this program? Those include a list of such as golf courses, country clubs, massage parlors, sin business, hot tub facilities, suntan facilities, racetracks or other type of facilities that involve gambling, and then also any store that, with its principal business being the sale of alcohol off-site. So, for purposes of California, what business was not listed as a sin business? Cannabis, that's right. So, although cannabis has not been identified as a sin business, stay tuned because we only got that first set of regulations that came out in October. We're waiting for the second tranche, and there may be discussion about whether cannabis constitutes a sin business for purposes of the program. So, what is the process? Just want to give a brief summary of what is the process for the investor. So, as we all know, the investor first has to have eligible capital gains. And what's that? It is stock, proceeds from a stock sale, or a real estate sale, or other eligible capital gains that David's going to talk about during his portion of the presentation. So, also, one thing that you need to know about is that the transaction that generates the eligible capital gains cannot be what they call a related transaction. In other words, the person realizing the eligible capital gains cannot have more than 20% personal participation in the sale that generates the capital gains. Once you have the eligible capital gains, similar to a 1031 exchange, the investor has to invest those gains within 180 days into the Qualified Opportunity Fund. Now that Qualified Opportunity Fund could be a corporation, it could be a partnership, or an LLC that's taxed as a partnership or a corporation. And as we'll find out when Eric talks about the operation of the Qualified Opportunity Fund, the fund can invest in stocks, partnership interests, or business within the Qualified Opportunity Zones. And finally, the investment has to be in equity. It cannot be in debt. So once the investor invests in the Qualified Opportunity Fund and the fund invests in equity, then both the individual and the fund have to self-certify by filing the Form 8996 with their tax returns. So now I'm going to pass it off to David and ask him what qualifies for eligible capital gains and what are the tax benefits and implications of this program.
Obviously, one of the constituencies of this whole program is those investors who have unrealized gains on the books, and that's there's other constituencies as well, but that is one that probably all of you have focused on. And it's not just long-term gains. And I hear that quite often from folks, well, it has to be long-term. No, it's long-term and short-term gains. So if you do the math, I mean, the short-term gains are actually more valuable because they're taxed at a higher rate. But it also includes 1231 gains, unrecaptured 1250 gain. At this point in time, the regulations don't provide for the recapture ordinary income type of 1250, 1245 property. So at this point in time, that would not be a capital gains. It's not taxed at capital gain rates. So it's pretty broad though, and it doesn't have to be just real estate. It can be, your father's coin collection. It could be any kind of property that is going to qualify under the code as a capital asset. So it's very broad, and it can be used in lots of different situations. Maybe a couple words on how the tax benefits work, because there's really as mentioned earlier, two aspects of the plan, and I think it's really important to make sure that you think that it's both an old gain and a new gain regime. You have a gain that you want to defer, you sell it, the gain is then invested in a qualified opportunity fund within 180 days, and then you have a deferral there, and that's the old gain deferral. And you'll have till 2026 at that point in time, it's going to be taxed. Or if you sell it earlier, it's going to be taxed. And that's the old gain. Couple manipulations to that gain though, and I call it manipulation because there's an adjustment to the basis. If you hold the asset for 5 years and your interest in the fund for 5 years, you get that 10% basis increase. When you invest in that fund, your basis is zero. And at the time you get a basis increase, you're going to get an increase in basis. And if you hold it for 7 years, you get an additional 5%. So at that point in time, you've got 15% basis in the fund. And that's the old game. I call it the old game. It's the deferral mechanism. Because it's just a deferral, you're not paying the tax today, you will pay it at some point in time. And that's very important for people to understand. Now, the fund, I call it the new gain, it may actually also have an appreciation in value. You put the money in, the gain gets put into the fund, and it also increases in value. And after, if you hold it for 10 years and you sell it, the basis of that fund is the fair market value you sell it for. So it's a pretty good win-win on the new gain piece, which is the appreciation of the fund itself. So I think if you think of it as two buckets of benefits, it'll help you as you read through these rules and you read through the pieces that keep coming out. I would also say that, going back to the gain question, and this comes up quite a bit, well, you know, I sell it in 2020 or I sell it in 2024, what am I paying tax on? The character of the gain stays with the investment. So if you've got short-term, whatever the law is for short-term gains at the time you sell it, it's going to be how you apply those rules. So they don't get washed out, they continue on. So that's really important because that comes up, we get a lot of questions about that. Is that better? Hey.
Oh, wow.
There you go.
So repeat everything you just said.
Yeah. But I think to keep in mind the old gain and the new gain is a deferral, and the new gain is really exclusion. There's a deferral mechanism and an exclusion mechanism. Now, for all of those accountants in the room, one of the questions we've been asked over and over again is this question about self-certification. There is a new form. The regulations don't actually require the form to be filled out, but it's there, and it's required by the IRS, so you'd have to fill it out. It is self-certification, and 90% of the assets have to be measured every 6 months for it to qualify. And so it's really important that it does qualify when those initial investors put the money in. Is it working? Okay. And so if you put the money in 2 months before qualifying, I'm not sure you're going to get your benefit from that. You have to qualify when you put the money in, and then it's 6 months at the end of the year, and we have to look at those two things. There's a lot of questions that are not answered in the regs about, I think presumably most of us are using adjusted basis. But there is a mention in the regs, and there's been a lot of discussion in the community about, you know, intellectual property. If you've got, I know we're talking mostly about real estate, but businesses with IP before 2017, how's that valued? Does that make a business not qualified because the IP has a lot of value? Those are questions we're hoping we're going to get in the new set of regs and more guidance with that. I have to say that the form needs to be filled out every year. If you don't meet it, if you fail the test, it doesn't mean the fund goes away. Everything gets unraveled. It just means you got to pay a penalty. And the penalty is based on an underpayment rate that's in the code, and it's the difference between the 90% and what you were at. So obviously that kind of digs into the gain deferral and the gain exclusion, but just to know that there is a self-certification form, which means, you know, the taxpayer has to fill it out and has to sign a penalty of perjury. And maybe it's I should move on, or is that good? Or?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Eric Hayden, president of Urban Catalyst. You know, there's a lot of talk about the tax code, and thank you, David, for pointing out all of the benefits for the investors into opportunity funds. I wanted to talk a little bit today about the practical applications of running an opportunity fund, and specifically what Urban Catalyst is, which is a real estate equity fund focused on ground-up development. So David mentioned a lot of the clarification issues with the IRS and other complications in structuring the fund. So I wanted to show you this picture. This is a structure of how our fund looks. I don't want to really bore you with all the details. If you want to talk about it, come grab me offline. But overall, you know, there's a lot of workarounds in order to get through the unfinished IRS interpretations of the legislation. And we have figured out a way to do it and structure our fund, and we're open for business now. I like Sean asked the question, who knew about a fund before October? I started structuring our fund back in July. It took me 4 or 5 months just to complete exactly how it was all supposed to work together from an organizational standpoint. We talked a lot about timelines and timing. I'm sure all of you have heard a bunch of things. For example, the 31 months to deploy your money once it comes into the fund, 30 months to substantially improve a property once you acquire it. So I wanted to give you a little timeline of how we look at it from an Urban Catalyst perspective. First of all, our fund is a minimum 10-year hold, and we are a 10-year hold so that we can maximize the returns to our investors by giving them tax-free profits after 10 years. So we're raising money in 2019. We're ending our fundraise December 31st. That's to David's point. We want to make sure that our investors are able to receive the full 15% tax deduction after 7 years, which is the hard date of December 31st, 2026. We have to deploy all our money within 31 months, so in 2021 and 2022, all of our money needs to be deployed. Our strategy to do that is we plan on financing our first few real estate developments in all cash, so we can get all of our money out there, and then we'll refinance and redeploy it into new projects as they come up. An interesting part about the timing of opportunity funds, typical real estate equity funds for ground-up development are 5 to 7 year funds. You think about it, it's a year to get to your building permit, another 2 years to build it, a year to stabilize, a year to refinance or sell. In this case, it's really like 2 funds back to back. So our plan is to refinance and redeploy our money in 2024 and 25 into all new projects for almost a second round of development. Of course, here's the day that everybody has to pay their initial capital gains they invested into the fund in 2019, but you get your 15% tax break. We've kind of speculated and thought a lot about why the federal government put in that 15% break. And we think the reason is a lot of people think that federal capital gains taxes might increase over the next few years depending on the administration that comes into office. And the 15% is a little bit of a hedge against that because you don't get to lock in your capital gains rates when you invest in the fund. You have to pay 7 years from now what they are. And then finally, after our 10-year hold, we will liquidate all of the assets in our fund and return our money to our investors, plus their profits. So a couple of unique aspects about Urban Catalyst. We talked about there's a lot of different kinds of opportunity funds out there. We have opportunity funds that eventually will be focused on businesses, incubators within, hopefully, San Jose. We're really focused on real estate, and I mentioned our 10-year hold makes us unique. We also are a multi-asset opportunity fund. I'm sure a lot of people out here in the audience are looking at their properties in opportunity zones and thinking, I'm going to start an opportunity fund, I'm going to do the ground-up development, and that's definitely something that people can do. We are a multi-asset fund where we're going to do a lot of projects. Doing your own fund is possible. It's still quite a challenge to structure. I think a good example of somebody that will end up doing it is Google, who came into downtown. Their big parking lot there just south of SAP, that's in the zone. Google will be able to structure that. They'll have plenty of capital gains to fund their ground-up development, and then they have an army of accountants and attorneys to make sure that they comply with all of the opportunity zone regulations. And then finally, which makes us very specific as far as what our niche is in the overall fund market, is we're focused primarily in the Bay Area. We have a very narrow geographic focus, but a very broad focus on product types. We're going to do office, hotel, retail. We're looking at multifamily, senior living, just a really broad spectrum. And that's to diversify our risk. But we really think that the downtown San Jose Opportunity Zone is the best in California, if not the best in the whole nation. So that is where we're primarily going to focus initially. Subsequently, we're going to focus on the downtown Oakland Opportunity Zone. And I just kind of wanted to show you what that is, because I know a lot of you have seen the map, and I know Nathan's going to go into a lot of detail about San Jose and how he and our city helped get the zones in the downtown area and in San Jose. So here's the San Jose Opportunity Zones, and they're specifically downtown San Jose. But I want to show you exactly why I think that downtown San Jose is the best opportunity zone in the country. So here you can see inside this black line here, this is the zone, San Jose State. That's where Google's going in. You can see Adobe. This orange represents projects that are ground-up developments that have been completed in the last couple of years. Blue represents projects that are currently under construction. And yellow represents projects that are in the pipeline or off-market projects that we are going after. If any of you out there see a property that you want on this list, be sure to call me. And really, that's it. I'll pass it over to Nathan. Thank you.
Well, before you pass it over, I got a few questions for you.
Oh, sure, go ahead.
About operating an opportunity fund. So in your timeline, you showed, and I just want to elaborate a little further about the working capital safe harbor provision that you're talking about. One of the questions that I get about the opportunity fund and the program is, why is this cutting out of that? The question I get is, how can opportunity funds comply with the substantial improvement 30-month requirement when we live in California, we face CEQA, the entitlement process. I saw a couple people from the city that were on the attendee list, so hopefully they're here. So either you can explain it or I'll explain a little further. The substantial, the working capital safe harbor and how that interplays with the substantial improvement.
So substantial improvement was defined in the October guidelines the IRS came out with. And what they say is you need to put in a one-to-one investment into your project equal to the value of the structure on the land. So that's the structure of all the improvements on the land, not including the value of the land. That's why it's easy for an opportunity fund to focus on ground-up development. Because, for example, I'm demolishing a parking lot. It's pretty easy to substantially improve a parking lot. It's a lot harder if I'm looking at an apartment building and I'm only putting in $20,000 a unit. I really can't figure out a way that I could do that with opportunity zone funds and have that qualify as opportunity zone property. Now, as far as the timing of how it all works, it's interesting. Another thing that came out in the regulations in October is we used to have 6 months to be able to deploy all of our money, or 6 months to deploy our money. We're talking about the 31 months now. We used to have 6 months to deploy our money. They came up with regulations that allow us now to deploy within 31 months. All we have to do is we have a structure. You saw in my structure sheet, I have a structure below my opportunity fund, my operating partnership, and if I put my cash from the fund into the operating partnership and I have a plan, that plan gives me 31 months to deploy. And my operating partnership below my fund qualifies as opportunity zone property for the 90%, 10% test.
That's a great explanation. I just wanted you to explain that because if you only have 30 months to substantially improve, in other words, as Eric said, you take the value of your building, let's say you got $1 million, hypothetically you got $1 million project, $600,000 is the land because good old California dirt costs money. The building itself is $400,000 for purposes of this hypothetical, and to substantially improve to make that comply with that obligation, the regulations and the people that I'm talking to and we're talking about says that if you put in $400,001 into your project over 30 months, you've now satisfied the substantial improvement requirement. That's all fine and well, but again, we live in California, we got CEQA, we got the entitlement process, and we know that more often than not, once you identify a property, you're not going to have the building completed or the construction completed within 30 months. So, as Eric said, the regulations in October talked about the working capital safe harbor, which gives you, so long as you have a written plan, like a business plan, and you're following that, you then can, I'll use these microphones, you then can have 31 months to work that plan before you have to deploy your capital. Within the 31 months you deploy your capital, then your calendar, the clock starts on the 30-month substantial completion.
And another couple of things that are interesting to know as far as how do we tell what the value of the land and the value of the building is, to meet this test. And and what our attorneys have advised us is we get an appraiser to do an appraisal for us. Another interesting aspect that we think is going to come out in the next round of clarifications from the IRS is a provision to prevent people from land banking. Because you can think about it, I could go out and buy a piece of dirt, say in Stockton, and then I could put a fence around it. That would be substantial completion or substantial improvement. And they want to avoid people doing stuff like that.
So thank you very much for the explanation of operating your opportunity fund. Nathan, why don't you tell us about the opportunity zones that you created in San Jose?
Thank you so much, Sean. And thank you, Hoge Fenton, for hosting the Real Estate Breakfast Series. This is one of the coolest regular events in real estate in San Jose, so thank you very much. And thanks to the audience for coming and braving this crazy weather we're having. And thank you for your interest in investing in San Jose. So what I wanted to do, your slides are good, Eric, I just need to get through them. So I want to talk to you about how we in the city are looking at this. This is a really big deal, and it's great to have you all paying attention to this and involved and thinking about what this is going to mean for us. So why is the city paying such close attention to this? There's a couple of reasons, but I wanted to also demystify a little bit about kind of how these zones came to be. And share that process. So the state is the ultimate decider on what zones get submitted to the federal government for approval. The cities we're able to advise the state on sort of what we think would have the most promise to achieve the spirit of the statute. And as Sean mentioned, there are these there are these thresholds around poverty rates and household income, but there's also requirements around the potential for business development and employment. And I just want to make that clear. We as a city, we're super engaged in looking at our census tracts and trying to understand which census tracts have the most promise. And we are super jazzed about the zones that the state ended up giving us. We got a lot of what we wanted. We did not get some of what we wanted, and we also got stuff we didn't ask for, and that's fine. It is what it is, and I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about how we see these zones kind of working together. They're really interesting. So why do we care? One thing is, we know that there's a lot of buzz around San Jose right now, which is awesome in terms of new development, but at the same time, developing is really hard. Costs are really high, and what we're seeing is, a lot of development interest, but also a lot of projects kind of not moving. And what we are really interested in is the potential for opportunity zones and funds to bring in a new source of capital partners to potentially get some projects going. That are good projects, right? They have to have, I think the sense is that they need to be projects that have good pro formas and that work, but just bringing in, additional potential partners. We also think a lot about jobs, and jobs for all kinds of workers and residents. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how we're looking at that, how that actually plays into why our zones are the way they are. There's also a lot of interest in opportunity zones from mission-driven investors, so impact investors, philanthropies, high net worth people who want to do well while doing good. We would love for them to take more of an interest in San Jose. And then the other thing is, the city of San Jose at one time had the largest redevelopment agency in the country. It spent billions of dollars doing great stuff in low-income neighborhoods in San Jose. We do not have any illusions that this is going to replace redevelopment. This is obviously a market-based, place-based incentive. But we do think it's a way to bring in additional investment into neighborhoods that need it. And a lot of our zones overlap with the old redevelopment areas. So when we were looking at which census tracts we thought we should kind of talk to the state about, what we thought about was which are the census tracts that have the built-in potential to support additional housing and job growth. We thought about transit, and so if you'll notice, we have two future BART stations in our zones, and we have great proximity to our BART station that will open in about a year. It's really important that if that public investment is going to be successful, that we are increasing density around those stations and bringing in the people to drive transit. Then we also thought about diversifying where our zones are in the city. We thought about diversifying what is the business space in those zones. And then we also thought about achieving the spirit of the statute. What are the neighborhoods that have been disinvested in that need additional access to housing and jobs and infrastructure? And of course, all of this aligns with our general plan. We have a very growth-focused general plan. And I just wanted to highlight our general plan plans for growth, a lot of it. So we looked at these zones. I just want to highlight these zones are really different. Yes, downtown is key, but we also have a zone in North San Jose, which is our primary jobs district, that's really interesting.
Speaking of the circle
Is this better? Thank you. I'm sorry, everybody. We've got an awesome industrial district, a lot of really interesting stuff. Let's talk about downtown really quick. Downtown is actually 4 zones. It's 4 census tracts. And census tracts are weird in that they're drawn in ways that can sometimes seem arbitrary. Is this any better? Okay. Thanks, everybody, for bearing with me. So the downtown zones are really worth diving deep into. Right? So thinking about what's in these zones, why there's so much interest in these zones, a lot of it has to do with we have the ability to have opportunity funds deploy capital quickly here because we have a lot of development in the works that could be kind of tied up and acquired and developed with relatively, for California, increased speed. So, these are some of the projects on the boards that would be great to get moving. We've got over 2,400 homes in downtown that are approved that are not under construction. There also are great needs in downtown. I was asked recently, why does downtown need this? Well, downtown is a great place to live and work, but downtown still struggles, right? It struggles with ground floor vacancy, it struggles with getting the necessary foot traffic to drive small business. These are some examples of renovation projects that are underway by some really visionary investors, but there's a lot more where that came from, and when you talk about substantial improvement, this is where you could probably actually meet that substantial improvement requirement, like that Hank Coca building, right? We all know that's going to cost a lot of money to get fixed up. The other thing that we're super excited about is not just real estate. Yes, real estate, totally great, we want it. But business investment is really how this law was sold. In other words, providing the ability for businesses to access growth capital through equity investments, through opportunity funds, is a big part of the vision. And we are trying to understand what are the applications for San Jose businesses. This is the Moment Shops on San Pedro. We think it would be really cool if these retailers, once they grow out of that space and rotate out, if there was a place for them to go where they could access that growth capital by staying in our downtown zone, it's kind of like almost like a venture capital type of model. But we're not just about downtown. So our sort of near east side zones have a lot of interesting stuff in them, and I'd encourage all of you to kind of take a look at what's in these zones. So thinking about, yes, development opportunity, but not just multifamily. Next to the BART station, opportunity for growing jobs density on that north industrial end. Catalytic projects like renovating, the decrepit Mexico Theater that could be an awesome space for that neighborhood and really improving that corner, and additional small businesses here. Industrial development as well. A large portion of our Monterey corridor is in a zone. This is key for our goals around equity and jobs, providing middle skilled workers, job opportunities in San Jose is a big focus for us. So what are the potential manufacturers that could come in to this zone attracted by the benefits of opportunity zones? North San Jose, there's a lot of opportunity here for additional growth. North San Jose housing, right? We have additional capacity for new housing in North San Jose. This is in that area. And there's a lot of airport parking, motels, low intensity uses that could be that could grow up. Some examples. And the East Ridge Tract, which is a little funky because the airport and some of the city planning policies in place. But again, there is some development potential there. There's a mall with a Sears and a JCPenney and a Macy's. But there's also some development potential as well. There's a lot of small business. So, some of the things we want are, yes, we want development in San Jose. We are a growth-friendly city, but we also are thinking about projects that really do try to achieve the spirit of the statute by improving neighborhoods. And so I just wanted to make that kind of front and center and to think about what that spirit is. So we're doing a lot of outreach. We're trying to share information about what you can do in our zones, bring investors to connect with actual opportunities, because there's some really interesting stuff in these areas. And then provide almost like a concierge service for folks who are interested in what can I do in these areas? What are the opportunities out there? So that's a little bit about how we look at these things.
Great, thanks, Nick. That was a good explanation of what San Jose's got going on with the opportunities. So one question I'd just like to put out to the panelists, everyone will chime in on this, is what do you think the biggest risk is for an investor and an opportunity fund going forward?
Well, it's hard to talk about the risks, I guess. I can talk about the things that are not as risky, which is a lot of people think that opportunity zones and opportunity funds, that the legislation might go away. That if like a new president comes in and says, okay, that was the old administration, this is done. And then what happens to all the money that you've invested in these funds, especially if you're like our fund, you have the 10-year minimum hold. And the answer to that is, these funds were started by, it was originally from a think tank that is paid for by Sean Parker, the former founder of Napster and a big part of Facebook. And he is a Democrat, and he really pressed this through. It had bipartisan support from Congress, and of course it was a part of what's called the Trump tax plan. So the massive bipartisan support behind it is one thing. You also look at who's investing in this fund. A lot of individuals that are accredited investors and have capital gains, which makes them wealthy people. Those are the same people that give campaign contributions to both sides. And we don't really think that the politicians at any time are going to say, we're going back and taking this all the way from you.
I would just add, I think the 10-year hold should really be something people think about, because it's not an investment you can get out of in a few years. I mean, to really take advantage of the benefits, it's a long-term hold, and it really is connected with how well the underlying investment is. So it's different, but maybe not so different from back in 2001, 2002, when these exchange funds, you look at them or not. Some of them did really well, but some of them didn't, because you were able to roll your gain into it along with other investors, and it kind of depended upon what the funds were, how well they performed, which is connected with things that none of us have any bearing on. How well the economy is, right? I mean, how well these investments perform. And I would just say also there are a lot of uncertainties right now. I started to keep a list of the things I want in the new regulations. But I got to about 10 or 12. I mean, I think there's going to the business investment, especially this healthcare partnership fund, there are a lot of questions because it was a startup company, maybe not have income in the first 5 years, and the rules just don't address that. And that's very common. I mean, the next Netflix is not going to have income in year 2. We were concerned in the partnership structures, which is not your structure, about reinvestments. Sale of a property, can you reinvest it without passing out that gain to the owners? There's a question about inside-outside basis of these partnership investments. There are a lot of questions. There was a piece that came out yesterday on The Wire that just basically said private equity funds are still on hold because private equity funds have a model that's different than yours. And they typically use a promote structure or a typical PE structure, which right now doesn't quite work. So they're waiting. So I think as an investor, you really have to think about what are you doing with the gain? What else can you do with it? Is this the right fund? Maybe 1031 actually might be better. Maybe this would be better. You're going to have to look at all your alternatives.
That's a great segue to the next area that I just wanted to briefly talk about was now that the government is not shutting down, or hopefully will not shut down on Friday, depending on how the vote goes today and tomorrow. Do you guys have an expectation as to when we can hopefully see the next tranche of proposed regulations coming out of Congress?
Before March 15th.
Before March 15th?
Yeah, that's also what I've heard. I've heard as soon as possibly the end of this month, no later than March 15th.
That'd be great.
Look at that.
Same source.
We didn't practice it either.
Same source, yeah.
So we got about 7 more minutes until the top of the hour, so I just saw a bunch of hands pop up. I think Norm was first, so.
Try to make this point forward. Nathan, the city of San Jose must have some spiffy place on their website that delineates these opportunities. Where do we find those?
You talk to me, the website is being worked on. We just finished sort of a draft prospectus that shows really good pictures of the zones and gives some ideas about what investors might want to think about in them and what's possible.
You can also look, if you Google California Opportunity Zones, the state has a really good Google Map overlay.
Actually, can I say one more thing? So, we're not just in San Jose. I mean, the map is super interesting to look at and like where these zones are. I mean, there's 2 zones in Gilroy. There's a zone in Fremont. East Palo Alto. There are zones out there that are interesting, and there are lots of really interesting mapping tools that some of the nonprofits have put together as well that overlay demographic information and sort of state infrastructure investments as well. You can find a lot of information out on the state's website, which is opzones.ca.gov. They have a lot of good intel.
And I'll also give you this reference. If you Google or web search IRB, the notice 2018-48, and if you really want to geek out, that gives you the entire list of the 8,700 recognized zones across the U.S., the 50 states and the U.S. territories. So if you're interested in, hopefully you're interested in staying here, but if you're looking at other opportunity zones, that's the IRB, Internal Revenue Bulletin, notice 2018-48. Another question? This gentleman over here, Steve. Yeah, his hand up.
Just had a couple of questions. One was, I know that this was approved on the federal level, but can you guys comment on the status of the state level adoption of this? And the second question would be, when we get to 2026 and the capital gains are due, or at least the taxes on the gains, are there restrictions? Are we looking at refinancing those projects, pull the money out to help the investor pay for them? Are there any restrictions on that?
I'll mention that California, at this point in time, they're not engaged in a conform, but there is a bill right now. I think it's in the Assembly, isn't it?
Yeah, so Assemblymember Caballeros has a bill to provide some CEQA streamlining for opportunity zones is one thing. It does also include a prevailing wage requirement. And then the other thing that's in the governor's budget proposal is to conform, right? So the state does not need to conform to federal law for capital gains. Many states do conform and are conforming. And so Governor Newsom's proposal is to conform in the cases of affordable housing and green technology, green energy investment, or green tech. We don't know what that means. We don't even know what the level of affordability would be required to conform, but we're in conversation with the state to try to get more information about what that might be.
And then to answer your question about, you know, in a fund, do we pull out the money by refinancing at year 7 to pay our investors so that they're able to pay their taxes? I mean, that's really going to be on a fund-by-fund basis, and I can speak specifically to our fund. It's our plan to do that. Our plan is to refinance our projects and give some of that money back to our investors. But of course, I can't guarantee it. It depends on how the fund is doing. It depends on the market and a lot of other factors. And not all that money is going to be tax-free in year 7. You know, the 15% discount of your taxes is really a 15% step up in basis. Because if you think if your initial investment is all capital gains, it's 0 basis. Once you get that 15% step up, then I can return 15% of your capital gains tax-free. But that doesn't cover if you have a full, 23+% capital gains tax rate from the federal perspective.
Let me just add also that when we're advising clients, remember it's only the gain that gets rolled over to these funds. The other proceeds are going to be in your pocket, and we're going to advise them to hold on to some of that for taxes. I mean, long-term hold is not tomorrow, but keep in mind that fund may not actually make a distribution, and there's some queries on how distributions are to be made, and the regulations need to go into that as well. Some question marks on that. So I think that a good investor is going to make sure he's got enough dry powder on the side to pay the taxes, because it's only the gain that gets rolled over, very much different than the 1031 that was mentioned earlier.
And David, you hit the nail right on the head. We advise all of our investors to put a set-aside account for 7 years to pay their taxes.
Any other questions out there?
Time for one more. Or not.
There has to be more. Kelly.
I'm good. I was really interested to hear Nathan's comments just a moment ago about the infrastructure investment.
Yeah.
And also your earlier comparison that this is not redevelopment or any version of that. Because just listening to the four of you, which is interesting, it does seem like there's a very sort of piecemeal approach. This is more of a tax and a policy issue rather than a way of, remaking a physical environment. And it occurs to me, and I'm sure a lot of people here who heard the governor's message yesterday, that this doesn't have any tie-in to the really big, expensive infrastructure investments that we have not figured out in the country or in the state, and certainly not in San Jose. Not just things like high-speed rail or fixing dams, but the Richmond Bridge started falling apart last week, just crashing onto cars.
So this is an awesome question.
Thank you.
And
That's all.
It actually, so that question of infrastructure is one we're super interested in. It's why we and the VTA really were looking at BARD. At the congressional testimony, the joint congressional testimony that happened soon after the law was passed, that subject was explicitly raised by a congresswoman who asked, can you do infrastructure with this? And the answer is yes. Through a P3 format, but there are some requirements around kind of the physical location of the project that make it really tough for projects that go outside of zones, but could make it good for projects that are contained in zones, like BART stations. So VTA is interested in this and are trying to wrap their heads around, is that something, number one, that the agency is interested in doing, right? Is a P3 something they would want to do? And then secondly, how would that be structured? And who would be interested in doing it with them? We need to be asking these questions around these applications that are not as kind of sexy to your garden variety investor, no offense to them, because nobody's going to do it unless we do it, right? This is not redevelopment. This is a purely market-based.
And when you say we, who do you mean we? The city or
I mean,
people who care?
stakeholders, right, government agencies, nonprofits, we need to push for that kind of information and analysis and and guidance, right? So what's going to be in that next set of guidance it's on all of us who care, right?
So I think to summarize, stay tuned because it'll be interesting to see what the next set of regulations are when they come out in a couple weeks. And I just want to thank the panelists for a great informative discussion this morning. And I'm sure we'll be around for questions if you want to come up and ask us. And I think we're done at the top of the hour, Steve.
We're done. Let's give them a round of applause.